Y'all remember when our boomer aunts would post on Facebook that all lives matter? Look, I know boomers are going to do what they do best, and part of that is not being up to speed with what it takes to be an anti-racist. They're too busy watching cable TV, eating tuna casserole in between games of Yahtzee. Okay. Now, that may be true, but actually, I think it has more to do with the fact that despite their tech and culinary limitations, they're older and wiser than us, and they have a hell of a lot more common sense. Hear me out, though. Believe me, I do understand the outrage that people have when they see the All Lives Matter post from the Facebook aunt. Or correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's something like this. The reason we're saying Black Lives Matter is because we're protesting the fact that Black lives are not valued in our society. We're trying to point that out. We're not saying that Black lives matter more than other lives. We're saying, hey, remember us? We're part of the human race too. And you're treating us like dirt. I get that perspective. I see where they're coming from. And I can see how the phrase all lives matter is like a slap in the face because it sounds like the Black Lives Matter position is being willfully misunderstood. And I don't think anybody hates anything more than having their political and philosophical positions misunderstood, minimized, made into straw men. Fair enough, but I think that we're also willfully misunderstanding where the Facebook aunt is coming from. I think there's a very profound and good reason why the instinctive reaction for a lot of people to the slogan Black Lives Matter is all lives matter. And I won't hide behind my Facebook aunt, okay? It was and is my instinctive reaction as well. And here's the reason. I don't think our Facebook aunts are denying the historical oppression of Black people. I mean, not my aunts. I don't know about your aunts, okay? And I don't think they're turning a blind eye to any injustices that may be done to Black people or any other minority. Look, an All Lives Matter sloganeer may well have the same passion for true justice as a Black Lives Matter sloganeer. The difference is that our Facebook aunts know in their bones that true justice will never be attained if it is sought in a tribalistic way. Okay, our aunts are trying to prevent us at the outset of treating justice like it's a zero-sum game in which your team needs to fight against the other team for a share of the pie. Okay, they realize that tribalism kills civilizations and it destroys peace. And now this is precisely the kind of division that is sown in the now infamous CRT movement. And look, I know that there's a lot of debate about CRT, what it even is, whether it's actually taught at schools. Okay, is it good? Is it bad? As always, we want to look at the worldview behind it to better understand what we're dealing with. The public debate over CRT is very much overdue. It's not really anything new, or certainly its foundations go back to the late 19th century. In their book, Critical Race Theory, An Introduction, Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanczyk explain that CRT builds on the foundations of Gramsci, Foucault, and Derrida, among others. And accurately, Delgado and Stefanczyk are showing us that if CRT is the top of an iceberg, the bottom of the iceberg is the worldview provided by postmodernism, as represented in part by Foucault and Derrida, and also neo-Marxism, as represented in part by Gramsci. To give you an example, we see the postmodern influence on CRT when Delgado and Stefanczyk explain that the idea of legal indeterminacy is foundational to CRT. Legal indeterminacy, they write, is the idea that not every legal case has one correct outcome. Instead, one can decide most cases either way by emphasizing one line of authority over another or interpreting one fact differently from the way one's adversary does. What we see here is the postmodern way of looking at the world. There's no fixed or natural truth in life. Instead, there are individual narratives that people or groups may have. Narratives, okay? There's not a right or wrong answer in the courtroom. It's really just a question of whose narrative will win, whose version of justice will win. It's precisely because of this postmodern aspect to CRT that Delgado and Stefanczyk also say. They say critical race theory questions the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and neutral principles of constitutional law. Liberal order, by the way, y'all, I mean, that's really just a reference to like the nature of the United States Declaration of Independence, the nature of our regime, the way it protects natural rights, right? Equality, neutral principles of constitutional law. Listen, when people say, why are people freaking out about CRT, right? What's the big deal? Look, guys, who knows? Maybe CRT is completely correct, but let's get one thing straight. It is a freakishly big deal, okay? CRT questions equality theory, legal reasoning, neutral principles of constitutional law, the liberal order, so it questions the foundations of our civil society. Yeah, that's a big deal. And honestly, it's not surprising. This is completely in line with a postmodern worldview. And our society is actually not founded on a postmodern worldview. And look, on the other hand, also then we see the neo-Marxist influence. We see the neo-Marxist worldview of CRT and how it treats race, as it treats it as the central factor in human relations. Now, for Marx, okay, social class and economics, right? Social class and economics is what is determinative. History, according to Marx, is the dialectical class struggle between the proletariat, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. All questions of justice redound to a class struggle. And similarly in CRT, all questions of justice redound to a race struggle instead of a class struggle. But we see that parallel. Now, to be sure, in postmodern fashion, CRT doesn't hold that race is, quote, objective, inherent, or fixed. It corresponds to no biological or genetic reality. Rather, races are categories that society invents. Now, and that being said, Delgado and Stefanczyk state that the first tenet of CRT is that racism is ordinary, not aberrational. The usual way society does business, the common everyday experience of most people of color in this country. So in other words, racism permeates our life. Even if there are no individual racists, as we usually understand the term, okay, CRT, of course, introduces this vague idea of systemic racism. This explains why our own Facebook aunts would tell people who are shouting at them, wait a second, believe me, I'm not a racist. I don't have any racist feelings towards black people. And then, of course, the anti-racists are like, oh, you're so cute, Facebook aunt. You just don't understand that racism is actually in the system. Even if you're not individually racist, it permeates all of your reality because of the institutions in which you live. Okay. Now, I actually do apologize for laughing. I mean, this is serious. Just that it boggles my mind sometimes. Just that we don't see how bizarre this worldview is. And listen, to be sure, we have had racism systematized in our laws in the past. Okay, I mean, Jim Crow laws were systemic racism. Slavery used to be legal in the country. Okay, people always bring up, and as a good point, the practice of redlining in housing in the past. And yes, this is all true. And guess what? All of these things are illegal now. Okay, the last vestiges of systemic racism in our laws were annihilated in the Civil Rights Act. I mean, frankly, the only laws in our country that favor or disfavor individuals because of their race are the affirmative action laws. And yet, the CRT movement insists that systemic racism is present. I guess it's vaguely present in the very institutions of our society. Well, that's what they argue. But how do they know? Well, that's because according to them, the proof is in the disparities. Okay, disparities in wealth and incarceration, etc. Now listen, some of these disparities are undeniable, especially the disparity of incarceration. But some, it turns out, need a closer look, like the wealth disparity. But aside from that, I'm not arguing that unequal outcomes shouldn't be a source of concern, especially if they're very skewed to a particular community. It would be, at the very least, an indication that our civil society is failing somewhere. Okay? But to argue that the fact of unequal outcome proves in and of itself that the governmental institutions of a society are whole cloth racist is an idea that can only come from a historicist, neo-Marxist, postmodern worldview. Maybe that worldview is completely correct and true. I just want to make sure that we know what we're signing up for before we swallow that hook. And you see, the positions of CRT actually make perfect sense if you grasp the worldview. In a postmodern worldview, there's no fixed or inherent truth that exists outside of ourselves. There's a reason why the clamor is for social justice and not true justice or natural justice or just plain justice. Okay. In this worldview, there's no fixed or true human nature on which to make comparisons. The measuring rod is not a fixed and eternal truth, but rather the power dynamics of individuals and groups. Like Thrasymachus argues in Plato's Republic, justice in this view is simply the advantage of the stronger. There's nothing true or false about it. It's simply a question of who's on top. CRT basically assumes that life is a battleground of competing truth narratives, each one represented by a different race or interest group. Oh, is the U.S. a majority white population? Yeah. Are a majority of the people in power white? Yeah. Oh, well, obviously they're carrying out their version of justice, and they're fine, but anyone who isn't white is screwed. Isn't that the mentality? Right? And that's the mentality of postmodernism and Thrasymachus before it. You know, the ancients actually went through a lot of this in the past. There's nothing new under the sun. What I'm driving at, everyone, is that there are more ways to promote the good of minorities generally, and Black and Hispanic people in particular, than signing up with CRT and Black Lives Matter. The way forward in our society is to fight for the natural rights of human beings. See, that's a goal that is clear, that is based on natural truth instead of truth narratives. And most importantly, that bases justice on the common humanity of all people. Okay? I want progress for Black people just as much as anyone. I don't need anyone to question my heart and my motives. If opposition to CRT is automatically taken as opposition to progress for Black people, then we've truly lost our avenues of communication. And look, I don't question the motivation of CRT proponents. They obviously are trying to figure out the best way forward as well. My argument is that the natural rights tradition of our founding, espoused by Frederick Douglass as a promissory note that had yet to be fulfilled for Black Americans, by Lincoln, who by his statesmanship was able to preserve the principles of the founding in the face of a South that had lost and forgotten those principles, by MLK, who continued to carry the torch of natural rights for all people independent of the color of their skin. This tradition is the better way forward. Or at least I'm arguing that CRT is a dead end. It can only lead to an interminable conflict of racial interest groups because that's the worldview it lives in. In his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, Ibram X. Kendi writes this: "The only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination." Guys, like what the actual hell? I mean, so then when does the discrimination end? It's endless. And this isn't a one-off. This actually is pretty well representative of the worldview, right? An eternal conflict of tribes. And you know who understands really well that this is all a load of crap? Your aunt on Facebook. Well, guys, we have a little bit more on this coming up, including what's going on in our schools. It's also time we did a little Would You Rather, And also, we have a top 5 today. We're doing top 5 Leo DiCaprio movies. See what you guys think. My name's Jim Haran. My brother Sal's here with me. We're the Worldview Bros.